And welcome to Empathy Science Shorts. Our question for this short is, what is empathy? So, empathy has a lot of definitions and has been thought of in many different ways. In general, empathy is seen as the ability to recognize, understand, and share how someone or something else feels. The definition that we use is the active process of putting oneself in the perspective world of another. Empathy can be thought of in a few different buckets, although how many buckets there are depends on who you ask. One of the major types of empathy is called cognitive empathy. And cognitive empathy is mostly focused around understanding how someone or something else might feel. This type of empathy involves using one's logic to perspective take on another's situation. This is sometimes called thinking empathy, as you aren't actually feeling how the other person feels, but rather doing your best to figure it out. Another major type of empathy is called emotional or affective empathy. And unlike cognitive empathy, emotional empathy involves actually feeling the emotions that you assume someone else feels based on their situation. This is triggered by a group of neurons in our brains called mirror neurons. And these neurons respond when we watch someone do something, and they react as if we were doing that thing ourselves. Because of this, affective empathy isn't as conscious a process as cognitive empathy and leads us to actually having an emotional reaction to another situation. Emotional empathy can help us feel connected to other people since it often makes us feel like we're similar or we understand someone else. Finally, there's compassionate empathy. And compassionate empathy involves understanding and potentially feeling how someone else feels in a situation while being moved to help them. This is sometimes considered to be a subset of emotional empathy, as it often involves feeling how the other person feels, but others argue that it's more of a middle ground where you're using both cognitive empathy and emotional empathy skills to get a sense of where someone else is at. The main distinction for compassionate empathy is that drive to help someone with their situation. However, it's important to note that with all forms of empathy, they can lead us to make incorrect conclusions on how someone else feels in a situation. For example, our mirror neurons react based on how we would feel in that situation, but that isn't necessarily how the other person is feeling. Similarly, cognitive empathy often relies on us thinking about how we think someone else would feel in the situation, but that too might not be accurate. So sometimes empathy can lead us to thinking we understand how someone feels, and that might not be what's actually happening. This is why it can be important to pair emotional and cognitive empathy with making sure that we actually ask others how they feel and checking our assumptions. A final important part to understand about empathy is that, at least in part, it's a skill that we can develop over time. While emotional empathy is a little more innate, there's an abundance of evidence that we can develop our skills in cognitive empathy. One of the most effective ways to develop cognitive empathy is to practice perspective taking combined with reflection. And that's why we focus on those two skills at Jaago. So the next time you talk to someone or listen to someone's story, reflect and see what type of empathy you're using. Think about how you can understand them better. Thanks for listening. And for more information, check out the Science of Empathy portion of our website. We hope to see you back here for another Empathy Science Short.